Welcome to Med Decode.
Great to be here.
Okay, so if you're a parent, or really anyone who cares for young kids, you know that moment. Introducing solid foods.
Yeah.
And especially those high-risk ones like peanuts, there's just so much anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. For years, the message was basically, wait, hold off, delay introducing things like peanuts, eggs. It felt like a ticking clock, didn't it?
It really did. We were almost conditioned to worry about triggering an allergy.
And that worry was completely understandable based on the advice parents were getting back then.
But then, maybe 10 years ago or so, things started to shift dramatically. Pediatric guidelines did, like a complete 180. Avoidance became early introduction.
A huge public health pivot, really, based entirely on some groundbreaking science.
Right. Yeah, that's our mission for this deep dive. We've got a major news study just out in the journal Pediatrics. It uses tons of real-world data from across the U.S.
Electronic health records.
Exactly. So the big question is, did this massive change in advice telling parents to introduce allergens early, did it actually work? Did allergy rates go down in the real world?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Because the spoiler alert is, yeah, it looks like it did.
So before we get into the new numbers, let's quickly rewind. Why were we told to delay peanuts and stuff for so long? What was the thinking?
Well, the intention wasn't bad, you know. The idea, roughly before 2008, was that maybe delaying exposure gave a baby's immune system more time to mature before encountering these tricky allergens.
So wait until maybe age 3 for things like peanuts.
Sometimes, yeah, especially for kids considered at risk. But the problem was, it didn't work. Allergy rates actually kept going up during that time. The delay strategy wasn't protective.
Okay, so the old advice wasn't cutting it. Then what happened?
Then came the game changer. The LEA trial, learning early about peanut allergy.
Ah, yes, LEAP. That really shook things up.
It was the scientific foundation for this whole shift. It wasn't a small thing. It was a landmark study. They focused specifically on infants who were already at high risk.
High risk, meaning kids with bad eczema or maybe an egg allergy already.
Exactly. Severe atopic dermatitis, that's the clinical term for eczema, or an existing egg allergy. They took these high-risk babies and basically split them into two groups. One group strictly avoided peanuts.
And the other?
The other group was given peanut protein regularly, starting early in infancy.
And the results were pretty stunning, right?
Astounding, really. The infants who ate peanut regularly early on, they saw an 81% reduction in their risk of developing a peanut allergy by the time they were 5 years old.
81%. That's wow.
It's a massive effect. And later studies showed this protection lasted into their teenage years, when you have evidence that strong public health policy has to change.
You can't ignore numbers like that.
Yeah.
So the official guidelines started catching up.
They did, but it happened in stages. First, around 2015, guidelines came out specifically for those high-risk infants, based directly on LEAP.
Okay.
Then, in 2017, there were addendum guidelines broadening the advice a bit. And now, the more current guidance, especially since about 2021, recommends introducing peanut, egg, and other major allergens much more universally.
Universally meaning for pretty much all babies.
Generally, yes, around 4 to 6 months old. And often, crucially, without needing special allergy testing first or complex risk calculations for most infants, just start introducing them carefully.
Which brings us right back to this new study in pediatrics. Because having guidelines is one thing.
But getting everyone to follow them in the real world, that's the challenge. That's the implementation gap.
Right. We know from surveys that not all parents jumped on board immediately. Even after the latest guidelines, uptake was, well, variable. I think one source mentioned only about 17% of caregivers were doing early introduction after the 2021 advice.
Something like that, yeah. Adherence is tricky. So the core question for this new study was, despite maybe imperfect uptake, did the overall policy shift actually move the needle on allergy rates across the whole population?
And how did they figure that out? This wasn't just asking parents, right?
No, that's the strength here. They used the American Academy of Pediatrics CER2 network. CER2 is comparative effectiveness research. It sounds fancy, but basically it gave them access to anonymized electronic health record data.
EHR data, so actual doctor's office records.
Exactly. Real diagnoses logged by pediatricians in primary care practices across multiple states. Not just what parents remembered or reported, much more objective.
Okay, that sounds robust. And they compared different time periods.
Precisely. They set up 3 different groups or cohorts of children, all aged 0 to 3 years. They looked at the cumulative incidence, basically, the rate of new diagnoses of serious IgE-mediated food allergies. the kind that can cause anaphylaxis.
So what were the groups?
First, a pre-guidelines group, kids entering the system between 2012 and 2014. That gave them a baseline before the early introduction advice really took hold.
Okay, the before picture.
Then a group entering right after the initial guidelines for high-risk kids came out, 2015 to 2017.
And the final group.
The post-addendum guidelines cohort. These kids entered between February 2017 and January 2019 after the advice started becoming more universal. This gives us the after picture, reflecting the broader policy impact.
All right, let's get to the results. This is the part parents want to hear. Comparing that baseline pre-guidelines period to the most recent one, after the advice changed, what happened with peanut allergies?
The drop was really significant, statistically significant, and clinically meaningful. In the pre-guidelines time, the rate of new peanut allergy diagnoses was about 0.79%.
Okay, just under 1%. And after the guideline?
It fell to 0.45%.
0.79 down to 0.45. Let's put that in real terms. That's a 43% decrease?
Exactly. A 43% reduction in the cumulative incidence of IgE-mediated peanut allergy in young children.
Wow. That's huge. That's potentially thousands of kids avoiding a really serious allergy. That feels like a massive win for public health.
It absolutely is. It's strong validation that the policy shift is working in the real world. And, what's really interesting is that it wasn't just peanuts.
Oh, the benefit was broader.
Yes. They looked at the rate of any serious food allergy diagnosis, IgE-mediated again, and that also decreased significantly.
Okay, what were those numbers?
The overall rate started at 1.46% in the baseline period,
Right.
and it dropped to 0.93% in the latest cohort.
Okay, 1.46 down to 0.93. That's a reduction of about 36%?
36.3%, yeah. Across all documented serious food allergies. So it suggests the early introduction approach is having a wider protective effect. They also noted a significant decrease specifically for cow's milk allergy, which is another common one.
That's really encouraging. Good news all around then.
Yeah.
Or were there any surprises?
Well, there was one notable exception, egg allergy.
What happened with egg? Didn't go down.
It did not decrease significantly over the same period. And in fact, the study pointed out that in the post-guidelines cohorts, egg allergy actually became the most commonly diagnosed food allergy, overtaking peanut.
That's weird. Any idea why? The advice included eggs too, right?
It did. The researchers suggest this might highlight that implementation piece again. Maybe parents heard the peanut message loud and clear, perhaps because of things like Bomba or specific peanut powders designed for infants.
Right, there are specific products now.
But maybe introducing egg consistently in the right form, at the right dose, multiple times a week, maybe that's just trickier for families to manage regularly in those early months compared to peanut. It raises questions about how the message is translating for different allergens. Beyond just the numbers for specific foods, though, the study had some deeper implications.
Like what? Does this data tell us anything about who benefits most? Remember, the LEA trial focused on high-risk kids. Does this mean we should go back to screening everyone first?
Actually, no. Quite the opposite. The researchers specifically looked at kids without those known risk factors, no severe eczema, no prior egg allergy, and they still saw the decline in peanut allergy and overall food allergy rates in those lower risk groups.
Okay, so the benefit wasn't just limited to the high-risk kids.
Exactly. This really supports the move towards universal early introduction. The idea that, generally speaking, this approach seems beneficial for most infants, not just those flagged as high risk beforehand.
That's reassuring. But let's circle back to that difference. LEAP showed an 81% reduction in the trial setting. This real-world data shows a 43% reduction. Still amazing, but why the gap?
That difference, 81% versus 43%, is really the crux of it now. It highlights what the study authors call the implementation gap.
Right, the difference between perfect conditions and real life.
Precisely. In the LAA trial, you had researchers ensuring kids got a specific amount of peanut consistently, multiple times a week, for months on end. It was highly controlled.
Which is hard to replicate at home with a fussy baby and a busy schedule.
Exactly. Real-world adherence just isn't going to be perfect. That 43%, while a huge public health victory, shows there's still room for improvement. It points towards needing better ways to support families in doing this consistently, getting the timing right, the frequency, the dose, and sticking with it.
Makes sense. Did the study touch on any other factors, maybe socioeconomic things that might play a role?
They did look at demographics like race and ethnicity, often used as proxies for socioeconomic factors that we know impact health access and outcomes. They observed something interesting.
What was that?
In the later post-guidelines periods, there were actually decreased proportions of children diagnosed with food allergies who identify as Black, Asian, or Pacific Islander, or Hispanic, compared to the baseline.
That is interesting. What does that mean? Better adherence in those groups.
Well, that's the tricky part. The authors are very cautious here. They state it's unclear why they saw this. It could reflect actual changes in feeding practices in those communities, or it might relate to ongoing disparities in access to health care, allergy testing, and getting a formal diagnosis recorded in the EHR system.
Oh, okay. So it could be an access to care issue, not necessarily a true drop in allergy rates for everyone in those groups.
Potentially. We know socioeconomic disparities exist in allergy care, so it's flagged as something important that needs more investigation to ensure equitable benefit from these guidelines.
Got it. A complex finding that needs more digging.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this study provides really solid, real-world confirmation that major public health recommendations shifting from delay to early introduction, it is successfully preventing allergies on a population level. It's working, even if we know we can probably do even better.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. For you listening, maybe you're a parent about to start solids, or you remember the confusion from a few years ago. What's the bottom line here?
The big takeaway is really positive. That monumental shift in advice, it's backed up by the evidence.
Right. This new study shows introducing foods like peanuts early is associated with significantly lower rates of allergy in the real world. We're talking a 43% drop in peanut allergy and a 36% drop overall.
It should provide a lot of reassurance. The science that drove the change seems to be holding up out in the community. The current advice is sound.
It's definitely good news for parents navigating this.
Yeah.
So as we finish, let's leave everyone with a thought to chew on, something to explore further.
Okay.
We know early introduction works. We see the 43% real-world reduction. But we also know the potential, seen in the Iliad tables, maybe closer to 80%. We're leaving some benefit on the table.
Exactly, and that raises the critical next question, doesn't it? What are the specific feeding practices, the exact timing, the right dose, the necessary frequency? How long do you need to keep it up?
Yeah.
What does that optimal real-world strategy look like to really maximize this protective effect and close that gap between the 43% we're seeing and the 81% we know is possible? That's the puzzle we still need to solve.
And that's a wrap on this episode of MedDecode. I really appreciate you joining me today. If something we talked about sparked your interest, or if there's a medical term that's been bugging you, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, be a pal and share it with a friend. We'll catch you on the next one.